So to start this video on equal footing, we'll enable HardOps and Boxcutter as add-ons. So we'll go over to add-on settings as we adjust them throughout our workflows, just talking. And for this, we'll be doing WorkTheCorner Part 4. So I'm going to go under my opt-in settings of the HardOps under the drop-down and just set my array to be 3D mode and set Boxcutter notifications to be on. Also, I'll turn on Q menu prefixes just to make my life easier. And from there, I'm pretty much ready to begin. So one of the benefits of some of the new enhancements with Boxcutter is static dots. Basically, if you have snapping on without grid, you're basically in dots, and by toggling this option, you'll be in static dots. One of the benefits of static dots is whenever you're hovering over a dot and you roll the wheel, you can actually get alternative alignment possibilities. So right now we're hovering over this corner, and with this particular drawing alignment, we're able to basically draw our shape out, press period, so we don't have to hold down Alt, and we're able to basically perform our extrusion on the corner, drawing out of the corner. So it's a really interesting way to work compared to the previous WorkTheCorner examples. I'm also going to press Alt V and then click on the EVHQ, just get my viewport looking better. I like to see the shading and differences between my shapes. We'll tap into edit mode, grab these three edges, press Ctrl B to bevel them, roll the wheel a couple of times, get it nice and rounded, and from here things will get interesting. So first, let's go ahead and deal with our origin business. So in the HardOps menu, we'll press Q, set origin, and we'll just drag this center dot up to this dot, and that will set our origin to this location. Right now we're already inside of box, so there's no need for me to use the D menu to change over which one I'm in. I just habitually do it. But we are going to go under the behavior panel of Boxcutter and set ourselves to simple pie, which means that whenever I press D, it'll just have this more static pie. It's a new pie that we're working on, but I just spend a lot more time in it now. So we'll press period again in order to bring the shape out on center draw. An alternative to that is, let's say at this point that we were just using regular old dots. We've already made the behavioral correction in the new system where basically whenever you draw from a face dot or an edge dot, you're already using center draw by default. But static dots is kind of a throwback system. So continuing on, we already have our origin business set up. So let's go ahead and begin dealing with our first latch. So I'm just going to, let's see, I'm still deciding how I want to draw it. So we'll come from this angle, we'll press T, give ourselves an inset, press I in order to lower the thickness. And then after pressing H to go into wireframe mode, we can look at what we're about to get with our inset. We can, from here, shift it to live while basically holding shift and then clicking to apply. And with our boolean automatically selected, we're just going to select the target, press Alt X, and we're just going to mirror it across, so that way we have a perfectly mirrored boolean shape. And also, I believe we forgot to turn this into a slice, so we'll just use Everscroll to give us our slice. So before continuing on, we want to make sure that we have our origins dealt with in an adequate fashion. So I'm going to go into set origin, click and drag here to basically set up my location and rotation. And we can press Q and bring up Everscroll to bring back our boolean. And for this one especially, you want to make sure your origin is set up. Whenever you try to radiate an object around another object, things can get really hairy really fast. So we just want to avoid that altogether. So for this, let's look at the amount of modifiers that are already present, just 3. So let's just give it a whirl, shall we? We select Mesh Tools and we go to Radial Array after going into the Q menu. And if we hold Shift and click it, we can actually radiate Object A across Object B. But we see that things did not work out. So whenever it comes to making these things work out, we'll just go to Set Origin again. And this time we're going to set the origin. But notice that the origin that we're setting is actually perpendicular to the area that we intend to rotate around. So we go back inside a Radial Array. And this time we scroll down to 3. And we see that we actually get the correct result. So when it comes to Radial Array, it just goes to show that there's still a little bit more work that's able to be done. I always get a kick out of users asking, you know, when is this tool done? How much more work does there have to be done? It's like, you know, every case begets more cases. So, you know, I think it'll go on until I rage quit, but we definitely have to keep going. So we'll select this one, press Ctrl I, and delete everything else, leaving only this area. So the beauty of setting our origin as we did with this particular piece is that if we press shift numpad 7, we can just basically orient ourselves to it. And if we press Shift S and snap our cursor's at the location. So I'm going to press Shift A, and we'll insert an empty. And this is something you'll be seeing me do a lot, is inserting an empty at an origin's location and then pressing F9, changing it to view, and then lowering the empty size. So basically we have a view align empty oriented with our view oriented with this object, which means I can select this object, select this empty, press Control P, keep transform, and now whenever I press RXX or RYY, I'm able to rotate this object. So let's just duplicate this, press Alt G to place it in the center. And you know, one of the things I love about the helper is being able to press Control tilde, go inside of it, and choose in front for this particular empty, which we can press F2 and rename this to be prime empty, which sounds epic, but is what I've been going with lately. And we'll just put it in the scene collection. We won't need it inside the actual collection. And so the thing is as we move this object between 0 and 1 on the Z, we want animations to be driven for these objects. So for this object, we'll add a transformation constraint in order to drive it. So choosing a transformation, we'll select our prime empty, and we'll stick in world space, set it to be local space. And we want to map from, say, 0.2 to 0.3, or let's say 0.1 to 0.3, or actually maybe 0.2, because we're going to be doing things at different stages. And the lower I set these numbers, the more stages that we have. So, you know, the lower the numbers, the more that can be going on. So for this, we'll go rotation, and we want to deal with probably the Y rotation, just because I remember seeing it give us the action desired. So let's just move our empty up, which means that this is now set to an on position. And whenever we begin adjusting these parameters, we can actually get this latch to behave exactly as we want. So maybe something like 180 will do it. I don't even know why I need to look. So now we have our first latch basically set up to deal with this particular empty. And so let's take this latch and M, and we're just going to move it to a location called underscore latch 1. And we may talk about that latch later. And we Shift A or press 1 to go back to our main collection. And we could Shift C, place our cursor in our center, and then Shift A, add a latch. And you know, I could set this up for reuse, but really we're just working the corner in this particular example. So with our view snapped to this location, I'm just going to Shift D, R, Shift D, R, while holding Control to snap this and rotate this around. So now we have 3 latches replacing it, and they're all basically clones of this one. And we utilize this object set origin to press Shift numpad 7 to rotate our view to it in order to just quickly rotate this around this particular central point. So really not a whole lot of complexity there, but I guess it could be daunting if you're fairly new. So now we have these 3 latches, so the party's ready to begin. So with this particular object, we're just going to disable the last boolean, and then go under operations and shift click smart apply to give us a duplicate. And we'll press I to inset, Control I to delete everything that's not the inset, and we'll press Control 1 to put a subdivision on this mesh. And from here we could press Q, solidify, press 2 to push both ways. Let's just make sure all of our booleans are back on, and we select both of them. And under the Q menu under booleans, we just want to go with slash. So now we've slashed this area out, and we can begin dealing with that one in earnest. So another thing is that we also have a degree of mirroring possible here, because we set our origin just so perfect with set origin, utilizing it at the right time. And so that means that we can draw a shape, you know, somewhat encompassing this side in an adequate fashion, but being very lazy on the other side, because we can just press X and turn this into a slice, and by rolling the wheel we're able to begin sending this on its way. So from here we can just press Q, go under operations. I'm just going to smart apply, because really non-destructiveness doesn't matter in this example, because I know after all these degrees of animations and different things that I'll be pretty content with the final result. But we will select it, press Alt X, put a new mirror on it, because, you know, old habits die hard. I gotta go in Boxcutter and put a couple of notches, because I just gotta see how notches do places sometimes. Sometimes I just put notches in places where they don't belong and I look at work in retrospect, but that's a story for another day. So for this object, we could have it press GZZ and have it go down. But in order for us to even move this object freely, we have to go under Q, Operations, and Uniquify. Uniquify will make the cutters that are shared between objects exclusive to this object via duplication, so the other objects are fine too. However, we see that it's not completely fine, and that's because this particular object, I guess, can't be shared with its particular chain. That's no, it's working on the top one, but it's not working on the other two. So that's a conundrum. We'll just press Q and do Smart Apply. And you might be wondering, hey, you just duplicated all those cutters. What about all that crap you just added in the cutters collection? Well, I'm not going in here to check for anything. But if I wanted to clean it up, I would press Q, go under Settings, and Alt-click Manage. And that will purify the scene of cutters that are useless. So if you were just really serious about those cutters, you can get in there and deal with them. So we'll bring out a circle, which the circle is new in this version, meaning that if I draw it out and I press bevel, I can press Shift F and I can get a reverse bevel, which is just better than a bevel going on the inside. And we will just shift that to live. And with this shape and our circle, let's just snap our cursor here and let's just try radial arraying it again. And it worked out just perfect. So I'm just selecting all these empties that are being created by our radials and just scaling them down. We can also move them to the cutters collection because they're not needed. And this is what we're looking at so far. So not a lot of animation, but definitely setting up the preliminaries for what is to come. However, you know, we want to inspect these meshes and look at them kind of closely. So, you know, for this one, let's get our view aligned to it, and we'll just go on end gun and just perform a few more interesting cuts. I like to have the cuts get a little bit more interesting as we get into the shapes and expose them, so that way there's something to reveal. So we'll just mirror that across like so, shift select them both, and let's try radial array again. And radial array is a champ whenever the orientations are facing the same direction. But with our set origin tool, we aim to begin a workflow of actually dealing with origins a little bit more intimately. So, you know, the returns of what that actually means will be revealed as time goes on. But right now, we're just starting with setting the origin. But there's so many tools that need origin assisting capabilities, if you know what I mean. So let's lower our solidify just slightly until we get it just connected with our rim. And for this object, let's also set up something interesting. And I know this is so excessive, but you know, I do all these rehearsals for tutorials before I do them. And then in the end, I start recording and I just go wild. I'm sorry. I should do something about that. So we're going to set origin, but since I have two objects selected, that means under my help that I could press S and actually use two objects in order to deal with my dots being set up. However, it appears that I can't get the dots that are underneath that particular object. So dreams are crushed. So how will we actually get to where we're trying to go? We did a smart apply, getting rid of our perfect origin that was going on here. So let's select this object, set origin, and we'll go from this dot to this dot. And let's actually bring that particular object back. Wrong object. We want to bring back that object. And so we select both of these, and because their origins are the same direction facing, we should be able to shift click radial array and actually rotate this around 3 times, cutting all 3 sides. So as we do that over and over, it definitely begins to get repetitious, but radial symmetry is one of those things that I feel could definitely be improved as a whole in 3D. So, you know, as I do it, I'm always just contemplating ways that it can be improved. So we'll select these, select this, shift click radial array to set up that radial array, select all our empties that are building up, and we'll send those to the cutters collection and just get those out of our sight. And so let's continue on with the video. We're like 15 minutes in and we're just cutting shapes and having fun here. You know, there's no time to party. So for this object, what I want to do is press Shift Numpad 7, orient my view to it, and we'll Shift S, snap our cursor here. And we'll do the same thing we did before where we place an empty. Empties are just a lot easier to control than putting the meshes in here. Because, you know, as we deal with the meshes, we'll be retargeting them, deal with their origins in different ways. So if we don't have them parented to something auxiliary, it just gets a little bit more complicated. So here we are with setting this to keep transform. And since we don't have a constraint on hand to reference, we will just go under our constraint panel and set up a transformation constraint manually, choosing our prime empty, setting this local space, map from, let's see, 0.2 to 0.3, and that's on the Z, and we're going to set this to the location, and all of these will be Z, and for everything that gets pushed, we'll be bringing this up. And this is exactly the one that we want to push. But before we do that, let's take a moment and hide and decide how far we want to push things. We pushed all the way through that one. In fact, there's a cutter in the cutters collection right here. If we press Shift and go back to our main collection, we can just select both of these, give it a difference. And if we look at the shape in local mode, that's basically all we did, was we cut into it with that. And this means that whenever we go to our empty and we choose to really push it on the Z, that we can push it so far. And we definitely want to push it so far. Maybe that might be pushing it too far, to be honest. Maybe something about that far. So if we move our empty, this is what we have so far. And what's interesting is we could actually take this object, just Alt-P, clear parent. And what this means is whenever it moves without this piece. So we could actually move this piece in a segmented fashion. So I'm just going to grab both of these faces in solid mode, even though I can't see anything in solid mode. And you just have to trust your click like an archer, you know. But now that we have that, this will open up and slide down. It looks kind of sexual when you do it like that. Sorry. Maybe one more time. Ooh. All right. Maybe one more time. All right. Seriously, I'm done. Sorry about getting sexy with my boxes here. But continuing on, what we want to do is actually take this object and, you know, give it the same treatment. We'll just duplicate this empty, right click, and scale it down. And this is something I didn't do previously, but I realize is so much easier, is just duplicate the empty, parent it, and right now they move at the exact same time, right? But if we select the second empty and we go and set 0.3, 0.4, we get something like that. And we could go in and make further adjustments like 0.35, 0.4, and that makes it go kind of fast, but you know, maybe that's needed for this particular machine, you know, really just pumping it. I'll stop with that. So maybe a little bit just with this little piece here. Sorry. So we'll select this and we will shift click Smart Apply, which will give us a duplicate. I'm going to take it in local mode so we can beat this thing with a belt and privacy. We'll select this piece, control click, control click, control click, control click, control click. And we'll press Control I, delete everything else. And this is all we need because we're just going to control click Smart Apply to turn it into a curve. The difference between using two curve and Smart Apply is Smart Apply will convert the object to a curve. So if I don't want the mesh around anymore, I'll use Smart Apply and it'll jump to curve anyways. So let's select a curve and we'll press Shift D, Z, Z to duplicate it, press Shift R a couple of times. GZZ to move it up locally, by the way. That's why I'm pressing Z twice. So now we see that this is our result of what we're looking at so far. So, you know, I just got a terrible idea, and by terrible idea I mean if it's cool, it'll work out, but if it doesn't, it'll look silly. So before I do anything, let's save this as QBox number 530. Guys, I have a QBox problem. Qbox 530. Get me a therapist. Anyways, we'll press 1, 2, 3 to get to collection 3. And what I want to do is use this circle as a jump off point, which will automatically orient us to this particular object. And we're going to press X and slice this piece out. And selecting both of them, we're just going to hit it with the All-American Smart Apply. But we're going to duplicate this empty, right click, scale it down, select this object, parent it to this piece, like so, and we're just going to pretend like we never came. In fact, let's set this to be 0.15, 0.25, and let's pretend like we were never there. So everything's still together. We didn't have to put anything in another collection. Oh, guys, let's go back to that collection again. Let's go back to that collection one more time. Let's take this, duplicate it, right click, scale it down. I should go practice some more before I dare do a tutorial. How did I not come across such a thing? This is amazing. Spacebar, select both of these. We're just going to smart apply because I don't want to deal with any rigmarole with this. I just want to see what this thing is about to do. I mean, you already know. It'll look great. So, let's see, 0.2, 0.35. And let's go back to layer 1. Oh man, that is impressive to me. You know, it does take a lot to entertain me. You know, these boxes, they're just my entertainment to entertain me. So let's jump back over to the latch layer. With the latch so cut out, we need to draw a box, but press W to use wedge, hold control to use perfect wedge. We can press Alt X and mirror this to the other side. And we're just going to use dots and wedge to just really put some differences in this mesh so its relationship with the next one is more defined. We won't be using bevels on this particular tutorial, which, believe me, is nice. You know, we would be talking about bevels then, but bevels would be a short talk. You know me and bevels. I'll get her done. So let's press Alt X, mirror, Alt X, mirror. And we look at this and they're all still the same object because we're not disrupting anything. And you know, one more thing is I like to put a rel in between all the pieces. So we'll select this piece and you know, things just aren't going to work out with it. So let's just shift click smart apply. And you know, what I mean by not work out is we don't have any rings on the inside to select, so we're just going to need to select an edge, control click, control click, control click, control click, control click, press 1 to go to vertice, control I, delete every other vertice. You know, that vertice can go to. I didn't like the way it was looking at me. So control click smart apply, and we're cooking with gas. And let's try scaling and pressing GZZ, scaling, GZZ, and I could have done this a ton more ways that were better, but I chose the worst. Looks like we'll be able to live our terrible decision. Let's amplify it. D, S, GZZ, 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 Alt S, in order to scale this one down especially. And I'm just trying to give it a little bit of an extra look to it. So let's bring down our multi-latch of destruction duo. Yeah, I'm looking at this piece that's going down, wondering if there's something that I can do to it to just add a little extra oomph to it, you know. So what we're going to need to do is definitely add some extra oomph to this piece, because we can't just set up a bunch of latches and call it a day without also getting crazy with the most central aspect. So I'm going to shift click smart apply to make a duplicate. Notice that I'm using this in a state where the mesh is pretty much sticking out. So control I, X, you know, solidify, select both of these. We'll perform a slash. We will hold control, jump off of this point in the center, bring it in, turn it into a slice. Let's see how much we're slicing off. Looking pretty good. And that will suffice. Let's press H and hide it. And we just want to look at this from a flatty view. So I'm just pressing shift and numpad buttons to do alignment. No one aligns faster in Blender. We made an alignment tool to assist with alignment, but you know, shift and numpad, God, those keys are fast. And not saying we're trying to compete with Blender, but I pressed Alt H and was like, what did I do to this mesh? So whenever this opens, we just want this to reveal something. How much do we want it to reveal? Well, we want it to reveal a big circle. You know, everybody loves a big circle. And with our circle, let's actually bring it back with Everscroll. And I'm going to shift click Shade Solid to basically duplicate it and make it its own mesh back in the main collection. So that way we can put some solidify on it, Q sharpen. So now we have that happening underneath. And with this thing, we're just going to line our view up with it and press spacebar to cut all the way through. And things are about to get complicated. So Control A location. I just wanted to mess up the location just to see if anything bad would happen. And it looks like we're about to get away with murder. Also, let's look at it from this view. And I'm just going to go in and use Knife Box to just put a line right here. And that allows me to go under Mesh Tools, set origin. And we're just going to set an origin from this area precisely to this area. And things didn't work out. So what modifiers we got going on? There's a lot of modifiers. We don't need them. Alright, let's talk about this again. So we're going to go under Mesh Tools, set origin. And we're just going to grab our origin and slap that baby there. And we can delete the other side. We don't need to talk about it. Also, these empties cramping my style. They can go too. And we press R, Y, Y. We see that we're getting our little flappy jacks. So, and that's our goal. So let's just press Shift, numpad 7 to orient to this area, Shift S to snap our cursor to this location, Shift A to snap an empty. Now you might be wondering why we don't use the place empty based on object part of to shape, and that's because I realized after our set origin business that we did not have the capabilities of setting an origin at an object's origin, being set and empty at an object's origin, but we'll be back. You know, anytime I see that there's a problem, it gets added to the list. Thy will be done. Amen. So let's just press Control S, and for this one we want this to rotate. This is one of those rotating ones, so I'm going to press 1 and then, or actually here's the trick. Let's just let's select this object, press Shift H, and let's jump over to the Latches collection, then press 1, and we'll just select one of these empties and type in copy constraints to selected objects. Go back, press Alt H, and we'll just pretend like we didn't have to go through all that. We'll select this, Shift G, parent, and apparently we need to make this empty a little bigger. So let's test out what we have. So, you know, in a way, we want this to open. This is our empty. We'll parent it to this object. You know, when it, let's Alt P, clear our parent. Let's select this empty, and we will parent it to this oof. Let's look at our constraints. And we try it again. And we see that 180 on this axis isn't going to work with this parenting. So let's just set our parenting back up. And, you know, I apologize for this being such a terrible tutorial. But, you know, these sort of things are always so complex to explain. But you're seeing my process. In fact, I remember going through this earlier, and I managed to solve it by changing the axis that was in use. So here we are. We'll set this to be 90. So let's grab our prime empty. GZZ to bring this lower inside. And let's actually look at this from the side. And even though we can't really see what the heck's going on, I can just tell you that we need to perform one of these numbers. But let's try that again. I'm pressing Shift 1, and first we actually want this number to be on the outside. And let's press C to get out of non-cyclic. It's not time for that. Alright, now we select this and this, Alt X, modifier mirror across to the other side. And we're probably going to need to ensure that we have a very large gap with this shape. So let's just force a gap in there. And something like that will suffice. So let's just press GZ. And you know what my mistake was? Is this object is right over the center doing this rotation, when actually we need it to perform this rotation in an area where that's not required. So out here I am moving the timeline. Tutorial's been going on too long. Gotta take a break to have some water. So there it is, flapping out of existence. So let's select this object, clear and keep transformation. And we just want to make sure we select the right empty. Now we select it. And you know, it almost defeats us revealing the circle, but you know what we also want to do is close these before it goes back down. So when it's at this point, we want this to close back. So let's try that out. So now we're setting up an animation to happen, you know, two different animations to happen on this. So for this, we'll need to add a transformation constraint. And we could just type in prime and get our prime empty, local space. I don't even need to look at this because we're using the same settings every time, except for the part where 0, 1, 0, 2. We actually want to change this to 0.2, 0.3. And we actually are mapped to the second one, so we'll copy the Y, and we want to make it negative on this one. See? See? Negative 90, I guess I have to type it in, the monsters. Let's turn it off. So at this point it's at 90. And then we're just wanting it to go negative 90, and we are in local space, and we want to set it to rotation, not location, so we probably launched it into space. And let's see what we set our rotation to. Y, Z, X. Y, Z, X. Alright, now we're in business. You gotta be real specific when it comes to these constraints. They get nutty. Right there is the moment right before we want it to end. let's see how high the empty is. So we look at this transformation properties and we see that we're 0.32, meaning that we can go to this empty, and let's actually start at 0.3, 0.4. Let's see what that looks like. Alright, maybe staggered back a little bit. Let's see, that was 0.3 to 0.4. Let's do 0.25 to 0.35. I think that'll suffice. And I still love these little latches so much that we're going to talk about one of these latches. Make sure they're not stuck out of place with bad parenting issues. Alright, let's go back to this one. Let's take a look at this one. So this latch is set to 0.35. Let's set this one to 0.35 to 0.55. Go back to our main, mess with our empty that's driving it. And this is our result so far. So in lieu of keeping the video timely, we'll begin jumping to the conclusion. Sounds funnier that way. We'll begin jumping to the conclusion, but yeah, we'll begin working our way towards the conclusion. So like I said, because we're not having to deal with the bevel today, getting to the conclusion is real fine. You know, a popular comment I've been getting a lot lately is, man, what shade are you using? And I keep telling people, I'm like, yo, I'm not using a shader, and people just are taken aback by it. So let's set up a little NPR. And I didn't even want to put displays on that particular radial array just then, so let's just lower that down. And if we look at our animation, this is what we're looking at. So I had to put some sort of cylinder in there. Might have made it ribbed. But this is what our result is looking like so far. So let's save it, and I'll press Control-Shift-S. And usually when I go to the second stage of something, I put an _1 on a file. And if we press numpad 0, we see we don't have a camera in the scene. So Shift-A, let's add a camera, because basically line work won't show up if you don't have a camera present in your scene. Keep that in mind. And we'll collapse our collections, and we see that our collections are fairly simple. And Shift-A, collection instance, or not collection instance, grease pencil, collection line art. And we want to move this object into the same collection too. For some reason I just don't like having my line art in the same collection. I like having it outside. I'm just a weirdo. But if we look at our settings, we're already set up with as far as our empties and layers and lines that we want to deal with. So with thickness, always divided by 2 twice, just like you see me doing there. And for range, we're just going to click range a couple of times till we see more of our line work. Because without the line work, this is not worth it. And the lines break a little bit. You know, every time I mess with this particular system, I'll learn a little bit more. So, you know, in case you're wondering why I do it over and over, it's my process. You know, I spend a lot of time doing things in a repeated fashion just to ensure that, you know, it's recallable from my memory. Alright, so maybe something like that. And if we move our prime empty, we still have our animation playing back, which looks great. And we could even press GX and move our prime empty somewhere else, so you know, you don't have to see the axial Z line whenever you're recording your tweet. And let's turn off everything. You know, I turned off gizmo, turned off overlays. It'll make it a little bit harder, but let's set our shading to flat and our viewport to white. And because we're in EVHQ, you know, the shading just looks a little bit better. But also like to go in and play with the sun settings under shadows. You know, I'll just find a nice angle. You know, sometimes I'll take it to that SketchUp realm. But having a viewport look so good is definitely a modern day luxury. You know, I was just talking to the guys the other day. I was like, you remember when viewport depth of field used to blur empties and lights and just objects that didn't matter? Petridge Farm remembers. But Blender's always getting better. I love it. And as a result, we have to continue getting better as well, because, you know, anytime they touch one of the aspects that affects us directly, we have to keep going. So this is our result so far. You know, I wish I could get rid of some of these little lines that are happening. I guess we could go to our line art and just lower our intersection amounts that is displaying. You know, I never go under 100 though. Maybe something like that. However, before we wrap it up, I do want to add a little pull around this area, which is something that I'll also do. So let's go ahead and just jump back to our viewport by jumping out of everything, and let's just turn off line art. And what I want to do is select this object, shift click Smart Apply in order to get a duplicate of this object. And we're just going to grab this edge, maybe jump to vert mode and just delete every other vertex. I just find deleting everything in vertex mode is just a little bit more sane for me. So after pressing Alt S to push this geometry out from its initial area, we can press GZZ in order to push this back. And let's just press Shift Numpad 1 to look at this head on. And I'm just extruding this out, just eyeballing it. I mean, at this point, we're really at the end of this. And we will control click Smart Apply in order to perform a Smart Apply duplicate. And from here, let's just convert this to a mesh. And from here, we can select both of these and shift click Radial Array in order to radiate this object around object B because it's derived from an object that has the same origin. Keep that in mind in case you're having some issues with using too radial. It's something that we will need to be addressing in the future. But at this time, I do see it as something that, high up on the list of things needing to be addressed. Let's actually get rid of subdivision. That just did not work out for us. Select our prime empty. We jump back to flat, jump back to viewport, change this back to object. And this is our result. So I'm pretty sure by removing some of the booleans I could actually get this area to shade a little bit better, but it is something that I'll be pondering for a moment. So one thing I could do to improve my final result would at least be to turn off intersections, and then from there raise the angle a little bit, and I can actually catch a few more of these lines, but we don't want to get it so high that we start catching the individuals of our cylinder. So that about reaches my threshold with it. But let's go ahead and turn everything off and take a look at what we have now that we've adjusted our settings just slightly. We can press GZ, and this is our latch opening. And with that, I present to you WorkTheCorner Part 3, this time powered by constraints. So I hope everyone enjoys this video. I did a little bit of preparation in order to ensure that I was able to perform this in a fluid setting. So if you're following me on Twitter, you might have seen a lot of posts about it. But even when it comes down to setting up the animation at the end, a little fun can be had with that. So let's go under our settings here, and we want to just lock everything and just make sure we're not able to do anything to our empty that we're not supposed to. And the only thing that we're actually going to be dealing with is the Z. So let's go back to the beginning. We're at frame 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the arrow key. And we'll press I to set a location, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's raise it to about that stage, set a location keyframe, and then we can go to 20 and actually make the rest of this happen. And we didn't even get all the way through to 1, so more than likely I'll be revisiting this topic just so we can set up a much more complex array of animations. But let's lower down the amount of keyframes it's playing and see what we have. And so far we have it way too fast. That's why it's important to test your animations. So what we want is in the middle, whenever it does the second phase, that there's a slight hold time. So for that, we'll just duplicate this keyframe, move it over a couple of frames, ensure that we have enough keyframes to encompass the animation, and let's just let it play. And that slight hold is what I like to see whenever I'm doing these. And then the final thing is to basically duplicate this keyframe so we can have it hold at the end, and then bring back the very first keyframe so that way we can have it return to its starting state in one fluid motion. We could just judge it at the same time. So if we let our timeline play, that is our result. So with these techniques in mind, I'm sure you can improve things even further using the power of set origin, just getting in there, setting some origins, building all sorts of internal rotations to be happening while performing the series of animations. You know, whenever it comes to playing with these constraints, I always just look at my timeline as just 0 to 1 on the x-axis, and everything I'm assigning is just being done in between with me working on micro digits. So hopefully this inspires users to get in there and play with constraints. You know, so often I see comments of people being afraid of animation, and I want to get into animation, and you know, these are comments not even worth responding to, because you know, the proper reply is, when are you going to get into animation? You know, 2052, you know, every moment you fail to practice is a moment that you fail to improve. So you know, even when you start far down the road, you're still going to be terrible until you practice enough to get good. But you know, that's not for me to say. Anyways, with that, we'll wrap up this video, and I'll thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.